Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the EKN Radio Network. My name is Rob Howden, and we're back for something we haven't done for quite a while. It's a new edition of The Hot Seat. We're going to get one of the personalities from the sport, whether it's a driver, industry, media, you name it, put them on the hot seat and ask them a bunch of hard-hitting questions, maybe attached to something that's going on in the sport, whether it's some breaking news, whether it's getting their input on what they think is going on. Very timely to get this particular edition of the Hot Seat underway, as we have a young driver from Orlando, Florida, joining me here today on the EKN Radio Network, Ryan Norberg, national number one for the last 3 years in the Superkarts USA Pro Tour, back-to-back national number ones in our driver rankings as well. Let's start by welcoming in Ryan. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us here on the Hot Seat.
Oh, no problem, Rob. Thank you for having me. I always love participating in anything e-karting news promotes and, pushes. It's always a good opportunity for me, and it's going to be run well and done correctly. So,
I appreciate
for
that.
me, it's always fun.
I appreciate it. Well, let's start out, folks. If you don't know Ryan Norberg, you probably don't watch the website very much, because he is essentially the number one tag driver in the country. The rankings say so as well. 3 times back-to-back in the Superkarts USA Pro Tour, X30 senior champion. And we're talking about some serious competition at that level. And again, Ryan, impressive first year with Orlando Karting Center and Team Felon. And then the last couple of years, of course, with PSL Karting. Back-to-back as well on the Florida Winter Tour Rock Cup Championship. We don't talk about that a lot, I think, Ryan. Sometimes we just kind of focus on 3 in a row in the SCUSA Pro Tour. But back-to-back in the Rock Cup Florida Winter Tour Championships in 2017, 2018. In 17, you swept because you won the Rotax senior component as well on the other weekend.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, back-to-back, 2 straight years, national number one in the driver rankings for ekartingnews.com. And this year, you didn't let go of the top spot even one time. That's a pretty good little resume to read off, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at everything, but it's all good, and, it makes you feel good. But, the truth of racing is you're only as good as your last race. And, I always focus on that. It's nice having the 3-time, 2-time Florida Winter Tour, 3-time SCUSA. It's all good, and it makes you feel good when you go to bed at night. But in the end, you're only as good as your last race. So never focus on winning, because, that can change in a heartbeat. The next race is never guaranteed, and, you always got something to prove. So, yeah, it's obviously good. But, at the same time, racing is a cutthroat sport. So, you can't live on it for too long.
Well, listen, obviously you won the first national number one plate in 2017, so you had it on for, 2016. You had it on for 2017. You had it on for 2018. Here's a question for you. Before I ask you to give me kind of your origin story, where you started in karting and how you got to where you are, what's it like to have that national number one plate on? There's a lot of, some of the younger kids I don't think like it that much. We've seen it sometimes they've elected to park the national number one to go back to a different number. Maybe it's a target. In your category, in tag senior, X30 senior, how do you feel about running that national number one?
Oh, well, I mean, it's obviously a challenge. It obviously puts a target on your back. But for me, I've always thrived on, people not necessarily not liking me, but, always trying to beat me. My entire racing career has been built off that. So for me, it's never really been an issue. It obviously puts a lot more pressure on you. There's a lot more media attention on all of your write-ups before and after the race. You're mentioned in it, and it does add that little bit of pressure. I even to this day, I try not to be rude, but I try not to read the write-ups before, because it can mess with your head. When you start reading it, I try and wait till after before, and then I'll read the write-ups and everything. But it does add a bit of pressure. But after the first year, the second year, you're used to it. It's just a normal day at the track. It's like I said, just focus on getting your job done, and you really don't have to worry about anything else. People are going to try and beat you, whether you have the number one or the number 348 on your cart. Everybody's gunning for you, and when you're mentioned a lot in the media, your name is out there, and people want to take you down. People want to beat you. They want that spot. They want the spot that you have. So yeah, it's always, regardless if it's the number one or wherever you are, there's a lot of pressure out there. And yeah, it's difficult, but I'm starting to learn how to deal with it, and it's getting a bit easier, at least on the pressure side of things.
Well, it sounds like you got a good handle on it, because there's two things that I kind of lines I bring out. Number one, you not reading the previews or reports, I don't think that's a bad idea at all, because, that's one of those things where you don't want to believe in your own hype, right? When you start thinking you're too good because you're believing in the hype, there's an issue. But you talk about the national number one, and one of the things I've said, there was a couple of young guys that didn't want to run it. And yeah, they're worried that maybe they have the target. I get that if you're in micro or mini or whatever it may be. But as a driver, you can't see your own number panel when you're in the seat. It's in front of you, it's on the sides, and you can't see it. Like you said, for all intents and purposes, you're number 348.
Yeah.
Right? You're out there thrashing out, doing your regular deal. It doesn't matter what plate you have on, you're still going to approach the race the same regardless if it's the one or the 348.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean I understand how people not wanting to do it. But like in 2016 when I joined the PSL Karting, I like the challenge. I like taking on new opportunities, and whether it's the same go-kart with a different number or a different go-kart with the same number, any opportunity I get to push myself and challenge myself, I'm going to take it. So yeah, I wouldn't elect not to take it. I like having it. It's fun, and it makes you want to keep it on there. If it's one thing to get it, and then there's another thing to lose it, and losing it is just as bad as it makes me crave it just as much as wanting to get it. So it's kind of, it motivates me, and at the same time it pushes me to be a better driver.
Understood. Okay, so now let's go back to the origin story. We've talked a bit about who you are. You're out of Orlando, Florida. You're 20 years old. You've been racing for 9 years. I rolled down the list of the most recent accomplishments, which are unparalleled at this point in the sport. How did you get started? Bring everybody up to speed on where Ryan Norberg first jumped into a kart, and then how did things kind of progress for you in 9 years to become essentially, as I said, the number one ranked driver, both by Superkarts USA and by ekartingnews.com.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, racing is really not a thing in my family. I mean, my dad grew up driving motorcycles a bit, but he never really pursued a career in racing. So it was always a strange thing for my family being, the first generation to pursue something that no one else has pursued. So, you're not really looking to somebody, a figure in your family for advice. You're just kind of, you're figuring it out all on your own. So, when I think it was 10 or 11, it was around that time, my dad and I were watching NASCAR. I always liked NASCAR, and I like Jimmy Johnson. That's why my number is 48. But I saw him and was like, yeah, let's try it. And so we went up to Ocala Grand Prix, and they had, some rental karts, and, I can still remember the song that was playing on the way in. It's kind of a lot of mushy stuff, but I remember it. And, out the gate, I just kind of had an knack for it that I didn't have in anything else. And it was something, I'd never experienced before. I'd tried every other sport, I tried basketball, baseball, golf, all the stuff. And I never really had a natural talent for it or a natural want to be in it. So after starting that, I went to the Orlando Kart Center that was just opening at the time, and we spoke with Andre, and Andre sold us our first kart. It was a Rotax Mini Max and Tony kart. I forget whatever one it was, but yeah, he sold us our first kart. And actually, Gary Willis with Team Felon was my first ever mechanic, and I've grown up with him, racing with him, and he has been more of an influence on, my racing career. If you know the guy, he doesn't settle for second. And even when you win, he comes in and you win and you expect that, hey, great job. But in the end, you get come on, you could have won by more, So it's, you never get that.
Wow.
You never get that same thing that you do at other tents, which I think, built me to the driver I am. And so, yeah, progressing from there, I kind of grew up racing behind everybody else who was good. I kind of was in the backlight. I don't know the correct wording of it, but I was behind, Oliver, Nick Neri, Oliver Askew,
Yep.
Kyle Kirkwood, they were all the big time drivers. And, I was right behind them all the time. And, I never felt like I got the recognition I deserved when I was out there because, everybody focused on them and, because they were the top drivers at the time. And so, that on top of it pushed me a lot too, to be the guy, that, people aren't counting on me to win, and people don't expect me to win. But, there was a point where I expected me to win, and I expected me to perform at that level. So instead of, waiting on my opportunity, it was my turn to go steal that light away from them. And, and that was a huge driving factor in my career. And so, obviously being surrounded by those guys and racing with those guys obviously helped, build my talents and build me just as the driver I am. But, yeah, it was kind of that, that want to be number one. And then the never wanting to give that up is what drove me to be the driver I am. And, you go into just recently, I'm racing with different drivers and I grew up racing with, everybody's progressing into different series and, you still want to hold on to that number one, even now, as the news is coming out, I'm still wanting that number one title, even if I did something else, I want to come back and hold that, it's a nice thing to have. And I don't want to give up that top driver spot anytime soon.
Well, it's really interesting. You talk about it being kind of, like you say, in the shadows behind the guys that were the number one players at that point. Yeah. Oliver Askew, of course, very good. Nick Neri was out there winning races and winning championships. And I can understand that being kind of in the background, understanding that racing against them has helped raise your game, but waiting for your chance to be in the spotlight, right? Yeah. When they made their move to cars, of course, Nick did some Formula cars, but has got into some super late model racing. Oliver, we know, getting into the road to Indy. But yeah, it was your turn to shine in 2016. You got the job done. That's cool. Now, speaking of your turn to shine, let's jump quickly. For the last 2 years, we've been blessed and fortunate to have a chance to work with the good folks from Road to Indy, Anderson Promotions and Mazda. And they gave us one of their at-large picks for the Mazda Road to Indy USF 2000 $200,000 scholarship shootout. Last year, we selected Jay Craig. This year, Dave Cole and I sat down and we said, you know what? It was a pretty quick pick for us. There was a couple drivers there, of course, but Ryan, we picked you because, just the way you've approached the last 3 years. And for us, it was, man, he's done everything he needs to do on track and off to get a shot at doing this. Now, you end up going to Arizona. You're part of the scholarship, which the shootout rather, which was easily the toughest of the two. So many great champions from, all these F1600 and open wheel programs coming in to run those Formula Mazda at the Bondurant school. But man, I know we threw you to the deep end, but I want to, and I said this to you already, we got a lot of great feedback from the people that were there, the judges, some team owners that were there, that you made a really, really solid impact. Let me ask you right now, can you talk a bit about the experience? What was it like going into that event?
Well, like you said, I was going into the deep end with really no experience in the car realm, and even on the side of marketing and pushing myself as, something more than just a driver is something I've never really done before. And, outside of the karting world, I don't have much experience. And so to prepare for it, I did a F4 test with Jay Howard, and unfortunately, the F4 is not even close to a Formula Mazda. I was hoping, I would get some experience in a car, and I was quick in the F4, but the two, didn't really translate that well. But I mean, the experience in itself, I want to thank you and David for giving me the opportunity to do that. I mean, eKarting News is, again, just that's something that all drivers dream of, and for you guys to be able to be a part of that and to select a driver, it's really amazing. I mean, for me, it's something you can't explain. It's just an honor to have. And I also want to thank everybody at Mazda, Anderson Promotions, and all the judges for what they did the week. It's a hard pick, and it's every driver there was really good. People say that a lot, but to me, all the guys I was rooting for. Obviously I want to win myself, but all the drivers there were well deserving of it. To me, the decision the judges have to make was really hard. I didn't want to be in their position. I couldn't imagine being in their position. But yeah, I knew I was the underdog going in. I wasn't going to let that stop me from trying my best and giving, my 100%. When you have the first night, it's kind of just like a dinner, a social atmosphere where you go and you speak to all the Mazda executives and everything. And, that was an amazing experience. I thought, I did quite well at marketing and talking, and I enjoyed it a lot too. I always thought that it was going to be a very difficult situation for me, but it was fun. And even the driving portion of the race was fun. I just knew, after the first day, I knew that, I wasn't terrible, but I definitely wasn't a standout in the car realm of the thing. So it was it was disappointing, but at the same time, it was encouraging, having some of the judges, Jeremy Shaw was talking to me and telling me, that I have potential and that I have, the driving ability to get in a car, and that, if I did it, I would have success, and you hear that from all the judges. And even the judges were saying, like, for no car experience, you look like you have car experience. And so, it's encouraging and at the same time discouraging, because, you obviously didn't win, but, knowing you have potential in something is obviously an amazing experience. And then on top of it, being selected for the USF shootout is an honor in itself. So, you're among the elites while you're there. So it was a great experience. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Like just learning everything and learning how to communicate with people, to me, was the biggest thing. And then on top of it, the driving aspect of everything was really fun, and it was a great experience for me.
Well, for us, one of the things we looked at, and we knew sending you there was going to be tough, because, folks, we're talking 20, well, let's say 18, because one didn't come and Ryan doesn't have the seat time.
Yeah.
Essentially 18 open wheel champions from around the country and around the world, whether it was F1600 from Australia, from South Africa, from Europe. There were so many different people that were brought in. Both, all the Team USA scholarship members were there as well. And that's one of the things we wanted to do too, Ryan, was get your name out there. The fact that you were able to get in front of Jeremy Shaw, you never know what happens next year if you're able to transition into a car ride and find the funding you need to get into a car, whether it's a 1600 or whatever.
Yeah.
Now Jeremy knows who you are, so I wouldn't be surprised to see you, if you're in a car next year, be invited to the initial Team USA scholarship, their own program as well. There's a definite possibility there. So,
and on top of it,
final takeaway from it.
On top of it too, it gives you kind of that motivation to want to pursue cars. A lot of karters get stuck in the karting realm and just are happy with what they're doing. And I don't have anything against people that are doing that, but once you get that taste of the car world, it does motivate you to want to get something done. Whether it's 1600 or USF 2000, you want to get more and more of that same similar taste. And I don't know, it's something you can't explain, but it's a different world out there, and it makes you want to jump into it.
Well, you know what? That's only thing we were hoping for you was a great experience. If you won it, that would have been fantastic, but the experience is what we were hoping to bring for you. Now, folks, we got to go to a quick break, because when we get back, we got to talk to Ryan about something, because some big news hit the streets this last week, and it's going to kind of change where Ryan Norberg should be focusing in 2019. Stick with us. More to come. This edition of The Hot Seat on the EKN Radio Network. Le Mans, Daytona, Sebring, the most legendary endurance races in the world, where man and machine push the limits of physics in an attempt to beat their competition and the clock. Now you can add the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando with USAC Karting to your list of must-attend endurance events. This brand new 24-hour endurance race is taking place on March 29th to 31st at the Orlando Karting Center in Florida. Plus, this is an event you can do in your own kart. There are arrive and drive kart packages available in addition to OEM and bring your own kart options. All entries will receive a fresh Briggs 206 engine package, tires and fuel, and the engine is yours to take home post-race. Do not miss out on the must-attend karting endurance event of 2019. The entry deadline is February 1st, 2019. Go to 24hoursorlando.com. That's 24HRSofOrlando.com, or the Facebook event page at Facebook/24HRS of Orlando for more information. Welcome back to the EKN Radio Network. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you've downloaded the app to your mobile device, or you could be listening, of course, on ekartingnews.com/radio. It's the Hot Seat with Ryan Norberg, 3-time Superkarts USA X30 Pro Tour champion, 2-time Rock Cup Florida Winter Tour champion, and, of course, back-to-back EKN Driver of the Year, up top of the EKN Driver Rankings. And again, we continue as a Bell athlete. Big thanks to Bell Racing USA for being our partner with the EKN Driver Rankings. Well, Ryan, we kind of tiptoed around some stuff of the first part of the podcast here. We talked about your resume, your attendance at the Mazda Road to Indy scholarship shootout in Arizona. But, primarily the reason why we wanted to sit down and throw you in the hot seat here was because some major news came. Caught me off guard.
Yeah.
And a bit of a surprise to you, obviously, as well. Breaking news last week, PSL Karting issuing a press release that they were parting ways with said Ryan Norberg after the second season of winning the Superkarts USA Pro Tour. Let's give me your feedback on this thing. In talking to you, once it happened, you said it was a bit of a surprise. You kind of figured you'd be back with the team for 2019.
Yeah, well, I mean, you kind of see it. You've seen it with AJ Myers, at least with TB Karts. Sometimes things don't work out. But yeah, I mean, kind of the timeline of everything is we had spoken before, and I'd asked some things out of my contract that a bit more than the previous year, and I was fine with if we didn't go the same route as we did the year before, I was fine, and I was open to that, and I tried to bring it up early enough in the season that if that was the case, we could end things on a good note, because I'm very thankful for what they've done for me. What Dominic and Steph both did for me was unbelievable. And they took a chance with me 2 years ago. And, it paid off, obviously, for them and for me. So, I don't want to come on here and bash them in any way, because what they did for me through the 2 years that I was with them was unbelievable. I mean, we had a crazy amount of success. But yeah, I mean, it was a surprise. We spoke in Vegas a bit about the next season, and from as far as I knew, we were signing together. We spoke, and everything was just kind of finalize the deal, and then we'll go from there. And unfortunately, I tried to get a hold of them after that, and there wasn't really much communication with everything. And then a few hours before the press release, I was called and I was told that I was being released. I don't know how exactly the press release was worded, but it wasn't really a mutual decision. It was one party versus one party deciding it. And then the answers that I got weren't necessarily didn't meet my standards of satisfaction. I didn't really feel that they were what they should have been. This situation, in my opinion, wasn't handled the best. Could have been handled differently, obviously, and it could have been handled much better. Am I thankful for all that they've done for me? Absolutely. I mean, they were a great team. Like I said, they took a chance on me and did some amazing stuff with me. But yeah, the situation probably could have been handled much better. And, even down to the press release, I was kind of taken back by the whole situation. And it really hurt me, because I have a lot of people there that I consider to be, close friends, and I trusted them. And, whenever you get burned like that, it takes a lot out of you, and it was quite hurtful. And then, I didn't really want to talk to anybody. I had a night planned with my girlfriend to go hang out, and I, canceled on that. I was like, I don't really want to be around anybody right now. I'm dealing with this. And then, I didn't even know they were doing a press release, and then they release a press release. And, then my phone is just, from then on, is ringing. And, stuff I didn't necessarily even want to deal with at the time. But, yeah, the situation for sure could have been handled a lot better. But am I thankful for what they've done for me throughout my career? Absolutely. The guys they're amazing guys. Dominic, Steph, Gaga, Chef, there's a ton of guys under there that I'm going to miss. And, it sucks that we can't race together again. It was a good connection. I thought it worked well with everybody, but that's racing. If you're not used to disappointment at this point, you're not used to racing.
It'll toughen your skin up for sure. Now, Ryan, one of the things I think you look at it, I know people get this. Anybody who races has their own team, their own squad. You're up early in the morning, you're grabbing breakfast on the way to the track, whatever it may be. You're really going to war to a certain extent, especially when you're talking about top level stuff like the Superkarts USA Pro Tour, the Winter Series, or the Winter Tour. It's aggressive. It's hard. And you're all in.
Yeah.
This isn't just rolling in with the cart in the back of the pickup truck. This is miles of testing and really and like you said, the pressure to hold a national number one, the pressure to, to deliver for PSL Karting, to deliver for your team. And I would have to believe that you talked a bit about, you threw some names out, but the relationship that you develop with people when you're in that kind of a battleground, I think that's the kind of thing I assume you probably be struggling with, because you develop such close relationships with people when you're, especially 2 years of running top level and providing the results.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the big thing. I mean, on a base level, everybody thinks that it's just like any other sports team, that you just go and you see each other at the event, and then you go home and you live your separate lives. But there's a lot in it. It's like you say, it's war out there. You spend the night with them. You wake up early in the morning and you're right there with them. You room with a lot of the guys and you get to know them. You get to know their personalities. And, I don't know. I mean, I think if you would have done this podcast a few days ago, I would have been a bit more, energetic and a bit more loud about my opinion on everything. But once you go back and you think about everything, think about all the good times you had with these people, it's sad that we had to end it on this note. But at the same time, obviously I'm thankful for what they've done for me. And the people that I spent time with there I'm hoping to carry that relationship on, after this. And, I hope we can still get along with each other after that. I'm planning on still having a good relationship with them. So, yeah, I mean, it's disappointing. It's frustrating that that's how it ended. And it ended on such a odd note, especially, when we had the opportunity at Vegas that we could all say our goodbyes. And I would have liked to have done it in person and, say my thank yous. And, I thank everybody after the race, but it's a different thank you, when you're leaving. It's a different way of going about things. So I've called Dominic, and, he gave his answers to everything, and, they are what they are, but I'm definitely thankful for what they've done for me.
Well, when one door closes, one normally opens up, especially when you've got the national number one plate in your pocket. I know that a couple of people messaged me saying, hey, how do I get a hold of Norberg? What do I do? Yeah. I want to talk to Ryan. What do you think? Let's talk about plans for 2019. I gave you, 3 days, the weekend to kind of cool down a little bit. We probably would have had a more, like you said, more heated, potentially more energy-filled podcast. Yeah. But I think the weekend was a better time for you to kind of able to, internalize things. But I have no doubt when you said the phone was ringing, it wasn't just people saying, hey, what happened? It was people saying, hey, what are you going to do? Because like I said, a couple people getting a hold of me knowing that I was going to, I posted up online that we were going to talk. What's transpired so far? What are your thoughts on potentially moving to 2019? Are we going to see what is anything happening right now?
Well, it's like you said, the phones were ringing pretty frequently after that. I had, shortly after the press release came out, I had 2 teams call me and get a hold of me, karting teams, for next season. On top of friends and family, I've probably had 10 karting teams call me and talk to me about plans for next year. And that doesn't count little deals here and there that you got to start working out pretty early. I think the most unfortunate part about this whole thing is how late it was into the season. The first race of the season in the karting world is in 2.5, 3 weeks now. So,
that's the big thing.
You gotta get going on this stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few, I don't want to say names and anything yet because, we haven't decided anything, but I just had lunch with somebody here in the Orlando area, and I'm on the phone with people all the time. So, next year is looking, is going to be fun. I'm not going to say what color it's looking like, but right. It definitely should be a fun year. And, the nicest part about everything is, the kind words people have for you, just knowing that you're wanted that much is really nice. And, a lot of the people have very, very are very complimentary to me. And, just knowing that you're an asset to somebody on not only on just the driving side, but, people on the business side are looking for opportunities on top of that. So just knowing that, you're more than just a driver to a lot of these people is very encouraging. And although, it's unfortunate that this happened with PSL, I truly think something better, a better opportunity is in the future. Speaking to people, there's a lot of people that are very energized with, the possibility of me racing for them. So,
Yeah, I can understand that.
Cool, you know?
I can understand. Now, question: Is it just karts, or are we thinking potentially? Are you going to try to make a push to maybe get a car program going as well? Is that something that's on your work list?
I definitely. I mean, especially after the USF shootout, I was definitely very energized to get something handled with cars. Obviously, the more difficult part is now that I am 20, I'm not living on mom and dad's dole anymore. I do have to make money my own, so the scheduling with karts and a job and cars becomes quite difficult. You kind of have to choose one avenue if you want it to be cars or karts. But today, I spoke with somebody today, so the possibility of getting behind the wheel in a car is highly likely. And I'm really looking forward to doing some stuff with that and developing with that person and growing that relationship. And there's not having a tied down schedule for 2019 opens the doors for a lot of different things. So, you have a lot of different opportunities ahead of you, and it's quite exciting. The first day was kind of depressing, but after that, everything's been kind of a high, and, just hearing all the kind words and getting stuff planned out it's exciting. It's very exciting.
We're on the hot seat here with Ryan Norberg. Ryan, I asked a couple of questions out on Facebook to see if anybody had any questions for you. Speaking of the fact that you say you're focused kind of on what you're doing and you're not, you're obviously not on the parents' dime anymore. Ben Schermerhorn actually asked, do you have another job or do you race only? Is that kind of your position with PSL? Was it full time?
It was at the track. Coaching and stuff is definitely more my job. So, having a group like PSL, they have a huge client base. So it does open the door for opportunities on the coaching side of things. For me, I could always go work at Chick-fil-A up the street and get a job doing that. But, it's my passion is racing, and, it's not necessarily easier to do racing, but it comes easier for me than, scooping ice cream or something. So it definitely is.
Well, it's a skill set
exactly.
you have, right? It's a skill set that you can transition into coaching for sure, data acquisition, whatever it may be. It's definitely, dude, you're the number one driver in the country.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Start coaching.
It's definitely, it's always fun for me. And, meeting new people, it's always definitely a cool opportunity. And, also with PSL, I was exclusive to Burrell products only. So, now that, I no longer am, it opens a door for a lot of people I can meet, potential clients. And, I've already had, on top of teams, I've already had a bunch of people contacting me now that they know that I'm free. And, now they're contacting me asking for work. So it's, again, the past couple of days have been quite encouraging.
So Ryan, you kind of talked a bit like potentially there was something already in the works, but at this time, are you still wide open? Like, should people be messaging you on Facebook and getting a hold of you if they want to talk to you about potential opportunities?
As of now, I am, but hopefully in the next couple of days here, I should have it decided. So everything.
All right, industry, go to work.
Exactly. Everything that's been going on is coming to a close here. Again, there's only 2.5-3 weeks of the first race of the season, so got to get on it.
I was going to say that a guy like of your pedigree is not going to last long on the free market. Somebody's going to come in with the right deal. It's not like you're going to be hanging around, but again, there's a sense of urgency. Like you said, Daytona getting rolling here in a couple of weeks, and then we're just less than a month away from the SKUSA Winter Series opener down in Homestead. So folks, stay with us. We got more to come on the other side of this break. I'm going to ask Ryan Norberg his thoughts on the current state of national level karting. I can't think of a better guy to ask what it's like to be in the front, in the lead pack of these Hornets at one of these top level races. Stay with us. More to come here on the EKN Radio Network. Are you done with the cold weather already? And are you ready for the 2019 season to get underway? If you're planning to race with Superkarts USA next year, we have the answer. Spring training is only a few weeks away. The SKUSA Winter Series is back for its second season, and AMR Homestead Miami Motorplex is the place to be in January and February. The IAMI SSE 175cc gearbox class will be making its debut in Pro and Master Shifter, and all the Pro Tour classes will be on the docket, including Micro and Mini Swift, KA100 Junior and Senior, and X30 Junior, Senior, and Master. The popular Briggs 206 Senior and Masters classes are back for 2019, so throw your cart in the back of the truck or into the trailer and escape the winter cold. Registration is open for the first round of the series, which will fire up the 2019 season on the January 11, 12, 13 weekend. You can get all the program's information on superkartsusa.com or register now at motorsportsreg.com. Welcome back to the EKN Radio Network. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Rob Howden. A new issue of The Hot Seat. And in the hot seat today, Ryan Norberg. Quick chat before the break about he parting ways with PSL Karting. Ryan scoring back-to-back national championships in Superkarts USA, back-to-back titles in the Florida Winter Tour Rock Cup as well with PSL Karting. Definitely the one of the lead generals for the Red Army of Burrell Art. Pretty impressive run for him. Ryan, you've been running national level racing for a couple of years now, a handful, and over the last maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4, but let's say 3, it got pretty ugly out there. For me in the PA booth, watching every race that comes on track, I get a really good feel for it. You, of course, in the trenches in terms of being out there, elbows up with the boys and girls in X30 Senior. What are your thoughts right now on the current state of national level karting? Do you think there's been a bit of improvement in racecraft over the last year with the introduction of the pushback bumper?
I mean, you're obviously one of the bigger guys that support an improvement of racecraft. Where I kind of think everybody with data and all that we've learned is becoming really, really strong. I mean, in the past couple years of the SCUSA competition, I mean, the first year I raced, there was 5 guys that had a chance of winning every race. The next year it was 7, and this year there was like 10 guys every race that had that opportunity. So I think one of the bigger issues is that with the amount of data and the amount of track time that everybody's getting really good, and everybody has a shot at winning. And when everybody has that possibility, nobody's wanting to give it up. And on top of it too, I think there's kind of this. When I grew up kind of in the shadows of all the better drivers, there was more of a respect for the top tier of guys. And, it was, you're waiting on your opportunity to take that. You weren't going to just like fight your way there. And, what you see when you're racing from 20th back to 40th or whatever, everybody there is racing like it's for the win. Everybody's blocking everybody. They don't really have that idea of like, that we have to work together. You're not as good as that top tier level. Not saying I'm better than anybody. I'm saying like we're not at that level yet, even when I'm back there with them. So to get up there,
and that's the line, Ryan. You're not there yet. You haven't developed it. You haven't earned your way to the front yet in terms of speed, skill, and respect.
And it takes a bit out of you to learn that. It takes a bit of getting beaten around. But the problem is all the guys in the top 10 say, once you get outside of top 15, it's, your weekend's virtually over. And with the drop down, it's nice to have it. But when you get back in a situation where you're coming through the field and where guys are blocking every lap and where, accidents happen, and I like it because it does calm down the starts, but, the racing becomes much more difficult. I mean, obviously with everything, there's a good side and a bad side. And I think the net positive of the drop down is obviously better than the loss we take. But, with that and, the side pods and everything, racing is becoming very, very, very safe. So people are taking those risks in the back, that you didn't have before. People are, aren't afraid to get punted because you can't, where before if somebody hits you, you'd go into the next corner and just let them know that you didn't appreciate that. And, now they don't have that risk. Now they can run you off the track and you can't really do anything about it until you get back up to their side pod and let them know, So I like it. And I think the net gain of the drop down is obviously better. Do I think there's improvements for it? Obviously. It definitely is a hot button issue for a lot of people. It's not like it's well accepted, but I think the problem with karting is, people not knowing where they are, drivers thinking they're not better than what they are, but not earning that respect that, it takes a while. It takes 9 years for me to get to this point. I've earned a lot of the respect that I have to do what I have. If you show up 2 years into it, you're not going to get that same respect. And, it's a process. It's not like it's like any sport, it's a process to getting to the top. It's not all you can just run up there and just be fast and you're gonna win.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. You talk about some drivers not, I think, understanding that they have to earn the respect of the drivers up front. Now, the more you race, and you'll race against guys, and I got another question I'll ask you in a couple seconds that kind of plays for this, but there are guys that that you can race with, and there are guys that don't. And because, like you said, the data acquisition is so good now, the tuners are so good, a lot of the time some of these younger drivers coming out of junior can get a hot rod, get a chassis set up that they can run up front with the big dogs, and we see them kind of have some issues when they get a little over aggressive. Would you care to comment potentially on maybe how what I call juniorification of karting is kind of affecting things? It seems like when we look at, an X30 senior race, of course, you're 20 years of age. There's a lot of guys in there that are in their higher teens. Well, now we're getting to the point where we've got 15-year-olds and potentially 14-year-olds running in the senior classes. Do you think that maybe the maturity levels and maybe the lack of respect or lack of the understanding that they have to earn respect, is that playing into some of the, maybe some of the more aggressive racing, some of the more rough racecraft we're seeing?
Possibly. It's more of a driver instance. It's kind of how you were raised at the track and how, you were treated and how you treated others. I think I've raced with 15-year-olds that I had the most fun racing with. I've also raced with 15-year-olds that when they pass me, they just run you right off the track. So I think it's more of a driver-to-driver basis. But, now that I'm 20 years old, you realize you're not going to win every race. And you realize, sometimes third is the best you can get out of the go-kart. And, that's okay. The sponsors are okay with that. What you're trying to do is just push that product to its limits. And if its limits are third and your team trusts you, then, that's what it is. It's third. And I think understanding that as a driver, obviously I'm not saying don't give up on the win, but I'm saying, sometimes it's okay to if somebody's going way faster than you and they get by you, sometimes it's okay to let them by and, follow them and try and learn. And if that's your limit, that's your limit. It's not settling, but it's just a more of just understanding.
That's great input. And the funny thing is I kind of keyed on you talking about the fact that there's one 15-year-old that you could trust and one 15-year-old that you may not. As a driver in some of these huge fields, do you feel like you take account? Do you know who you're racing with? Like if you go into a corner and go, okay, I got to watch this guy here, or hey, this 15-year-old kid's he's gonna race me clean.
Yeah.
Is that a mental inventory that you have that you kind of know who you're battling against?
Of course. And, I'm hoping to do more videos about that, honestly. I don't know if you've followed my YouTube channel, but, I kind of want to do more videos on driver body, body language. You can kind of tell by looking at the guy that you're coming up on what his goal is. It's the twitchier the driver, the more you got to be aware, the more relaxed, the less they look back, the more relaxed you can be. It's not necessarily, obviously driver to driver, if you have beef with somebody, they're going to try and race you rough. But to me, it's more body language and, watching how the race transpires in front of you and seeing, how they've been handling other people and how they've been handling you and learning, every race is going to be different. Every race has its characteristics and, some drivers are dirty, but, sometimes you'll pass them and they don't really care. So, it's more just reading the body language of other drivers and, reading, how they've been acting, where their kart is, what stage in the race you're in. If it's lap 20, obviously, the pass is going to be different than it would be at lap 4. And, so it's just more, again, it goes back to maturity and learning all this stuff, but I'm kind of hoping to do more videos about it on my YouTube, not only to, kind of teach people, but, it makes my racing easier if people act correctly.
So those of you listening here on the EKN Radio Network, we have Ryan Norberg here in the hot seat. We're going to give him the chance at the end of the podcast to give you all his social media accounts. We'll get you hooked up on the YouTube channel. We'll make sure we have that linked in as well when we post this to Facebook. All right, let me ask you this then. You're in the hot seat, so this is a good one. I'm not going to ask you to throw anybody under the bus. Mm-hmm. But if I were to ask you to name a couple drivers that you're always comfortable racing wheel to wheel with, who would they be? Who are the guys you're going to say, you know what? Yeah, dude, we're elbows up for 20 laps. I know you're going to race me hard. I'm going to pass you. You're going to pass me. I'll give you a chance to say a couple of names if you have any.
To be honest, it'd probably be easier to name the other ones. It's not that I don't have I don't have people I race well against. That a lot of the people, majority of the time, you're going to race clean with. It's just I have gotten to a point where I don't expect to be raced in that fashion. And
okay, does everybody have a mean streak then? You think? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're saying not really nobody just is always super clean. Somebody's always going to maybe give a little.
It kind of comes down to the race, because sometimes, if somebody's fast and you pass them, they're not going to panic and they're not going to be rough with you. And, they're not in that desperation mode where if somebody's slow, they're going to race you rough. So, I mean, I have people, I can name like Brandon Jarscrack is good. Austin Garrison, they'll race you good. They'll race you clean, they'll race you hard, and you don't really have an issue with that. But, sometimes there are races where either I'm more desperate, they're more desperate, and it just happens to be a little bit more rough. And, I don't expect them to race me as well as I would want to be raced. It's, again, like I told you, you deal with a lot of disappointment. At this point, I'm to the point where I don't expect it, and then that way I don't get disappointed by how I'm raced.
So, Ryan, if you're struggling a little bit and you're running that block and line down the inside, you expect to get a little maybe a little action.
Oh, yeah. I come in and tell people on the scales, I'm like, I'm surprised you waited so long. I was expecting that 3 laps before. I've done that more than once. I've done that more than once.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I appreciate that, honestly. All right, folks, when we come back, I got one more question from Facebook I'm going to ask to Ryan Norberg. Then we're going to go in. First time we've ever had him for this. We're going to do the EKN Fast 5 after this break.
Introducing EP3, Electronic Performance and Racing Trade. EP3 is the revolutionary new web-based, trade-only product sourcing platform that works 24/7 to connect performance parts suppliers with racing business professionals around the world. Find new products and technologies all year long, accessible everywhere, from anywhere, 24/7. EP3 is the only product sourcing platform as innovative and fast-paced as the racing market itself. EP3 is the fastest, most efficient, and cost-effective way to introduce new parts and services to the worldwide racing trade while they're red hot, allowing builders, race teams, retailers, engineers, and other verified racing businesses to access them from anywhere in the world, day or night. The world is changing, and we're changing with it. Welcome to the future. EP3, the global online platform for the performance and racing industry. Visit us at www.epartrade.com, or you can reach us at 323-870-9300.
With the season winding down, it's time to start planning for 2019 and how you're going to take your racing to the next level. For so many race winners and championship winners, that choice was obvious. Joining the Rawlson Performance Group and its staff of multi-time national champions, Super Nationals winners, and Team USA members. We're dedicated to your development, your constant improvement, and your success. Our goal is to help you raise your game and win races. It's what we do. We win. Our tent is already fully booked for this year's SCUSA Super Nationals in Las Vegas, but we're now reserving spots in our program for the 2019 Superkarts USA Winter Series, the Pro Tour, the Super Nationals, and both the California Pro Kart Challenge and the Can-Am Karting Challenge. If you're looking forward to 2019 and you want to explode out of the gate to put in the best season of your life, call us to reserve a space under our tent for the Superkarts USA Winter Series. It's been an incredible season at the Rawlson Performance Group, and we couldn't be more proud of our drivers and their successes. On the SCUSA Pro Tour, we won the S2 Stock Honda Championship and earned vice champion honors in S1 Stock Honda, X30 Senior, and X30 Masters. In the California Pro Kart Challenge, we won the Mini Swift title, and in the Can-Am Karting Challenge, our drivers were crowned champions in TaG Senior, X30 Junior, and Micro Swift. If you want to fight for championships in 2019, call us. If you want to improve your skills and your chances to win, the answer is the same. Call us at 503-260-4514. The Rawlson Performance Group. We race to win. Welcome back to the EKN Radio Network. We got Ryan Norberg, the number 1 ranked tag driver in North America, in the hot seat. My name's Rob Howden. One more question from our post on Facebook. Rusty Fox asked a question. Ryan, what other superstitions do you have during a race weekend? Any superstitions for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm very superstitious, but there's like 3 major ones. So like the first one, right. I haven't been doing it that much often. Like I wear like super long, kind of goofy looking socks. I don't wear them off track, but every time I go on track, I have some weird long sock, and I have a pair that every time I put on, I do better. So I save those for Super Sunday or something.
Yeah,
there's weird stuff like that. The bathroom stall, I always use the same bathroom stall the entire week. That's just something I do. And if the week's going bad, I'll change to a different stall, and that'll be the stall.
I get that.
And then and also like I'm religious, so I believe in God, and so every race before I go out, I pray for safety of everybody else, and I pray for myself, and that I don't pray to win the race, but I pray that we all compete at our best level, and that we're all safe, and we don't end up in an ambulance before we go home. So that's one thing that happens at every race, and the socks and stuff is more just a goofy thing.
Well, I like that. That's great answers. And Rusty Fox, thank you so much for getting on Facebook and firing up a question. All right, we're almost done this podcast. It's hot seat. We'll get Ryan out of it in a bit, but we got to get him into the EKN Fast 5. 5 quick questions regarding his career and just to give some more insight. So, folks, this is it. This is the EKN Fast 5 with the number 1 ranked driver in the country. Again, back-to-back years, 2017, 2018 in the tag senior class. It is Ryan Norberg. Ryan, are you ready for the Fast 5?
Yeah, let's go.
Here we go. Number 1, what was your first kart? And give me some details.
Tony Kart. What was it? It was a Tony Kart Cadet chassis. It's like the Nordics or something. And it was, yeah.
Right. Now talk about it. Like, did you pimp it out with some cool decals? Were you that kind of guy?
I was too afraid to. I had a black suit and a goofy haircut, so I already looked bad at the track, and I didn't want to do anything else to make myself look any worse. So, I left it the same. After that, after I had that kart, I bought another kart that I had white side pods on, and I never cleaned it. So by the end of that use of the kart, it was a brown kart, and it looked quite nasty. So, yeah, no. My first 2 karts were just a standard, like the Tony Kart Nordics. I think that's what it is. And then the next one after that was just the same thing, but a little brown after a whole season of racing.
All right. I was just writing down something here. Note to self, Rob, contact Norberg's parents to find picture of goofy haircut.
I'll send it to you after. You'll love it.
I appreciate it. All right. Question number 2. What is your favorite kart track?
Oh, probably a mixture of, obviously Orlando Kart Center is one of my most favorite, just because I live there and I have the most time on that track. And I think there's a lot of characteristics there, but, I also love Miller Motorsports Park. I think that's what it's called now, or whatever.
Yep. I think it's all actually called the Utah Motorsports Complex or campus.
Utah is I had a fun race there back in 2014, I think it was, and I've always loved it ever since. And those are probably the 2 off the top of my head. I could probably think of some more here, but off the top of my head, every time I get asked that question, those are the 2 that I answer with.
And we're going back there this year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For the Spring Nationals. Excuse the Spring Nationals. Question number 3. What's the biggest win in your karting career?
Probably the SCUSA Spring Nationals. That first one I won in 2016, and it wasn't really because of the win. It was just, it was my first ever SCUSA race, and no one knew who I was. And then by the end of practice, everybody, you'd walk up to the grid and people are pointing at you, looking at you, trying to follow you, and that wasn't happening before. And then on top of it, the first day, all the racing was in the wet. I mean, in the dry, and then in the wet, it just rained for the final. And for me, I went around about halfway through the race and had fallen back to 5th. And I remember telling myself, dude, you just won everything, and you're seriously going to blow this because you don't know how to drive in the rain. And yeah, after that, I was not losing. I remember going off track and then back on track, passing somebody, and then I was not losing that race. And for me, it was just kind of a good a thing for my abilities and believing in myself. It was one of those things that when I got done with that day, I was on cloud 9.
I like the fact that you check yourself in the middle of the race.
Oh, I do that all the time, dude. Rob. Like
I do too. Gather back
I get
up.
Passed by 4 or 5 guys, and your instinct is to want to get them back as fast as possible. But there's so many times where I'm like, dude, you're okay. Take a breath. You've got it. You've got the speed. Just slow down. There's 20 laps left.
Yeah, there's some insight for all you racers out there, you young drivers that lose a couple of spots. Just take a deep breath.
Yeah, it'll all be okay.
And go back and get them. Yeah. All right. Question number 4, the EKN Fast 5 with Ryan Norberg. Who is your biggest rival?
Oh, I've had a few. I've had a few. Kyle Kirkwood used to be one for a while. Austin Garrison used to be one growing up all the time. We always joke about it because we're on the same team and we grew up, but it was literally I beat him, I would be upset. I beat him, he'd be upset. He'd beat me, I'd be upset. It was always we always joked about it. We still have the joke to this day. But yeah, then it was probably Kyle because he was a good contender I have, and then Jake as of recently was a good one, and there's a lot out there, and I don't like to do the whole rival thing because in my mind I'm here to win and I'm always going to win. Every race I go to I believe I'm going to win the race. So I don't like doing the rival thing because to me it gives people more credibility than they need to have, and it puts them on my level. I don't like doing.
I like that. All right, final question of the Fast 5. Who has been your biggest mentor or influence?
It'd probably be Gary Willis. Like I've grown up with that guy, and through everything, the guy has always been there for me, and he gives you that kick in the butt when you need it, and he's also there to compliment you. Even after this, I called him, and he was very comforting, and gave me some advice, and I could probably name a few other names if I had a little bit more time to think, but off the top of my head, he's been somebody who's been a big proponent into why I'm the driver I am today, and at least not settling for second. He was always a guy that was like, give it 100%, and even when you win by 10 seconds. Don't win by 9. And if you can win by 10, win by 11. So it was always that same mentality. That's at least driving wise is the person I am today.
Well, there you go. Ryan Norberg, folks, the EKN Fast 5. My friend, you're out of the hot seat. Nice job. Thanks. Done. Okay, let's line them up. People want to follow you on social media. Where do they do it? What are your accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Let's start with that.
So on Facebook, it's obviously it's Ryan Norberg and Ryan Norberg Racing. I kind of use both. So, if I have one thing on my personal account, I share it on my racing account. So if you follow one, you follow both. But yeah, follow both if you want to. On Instagram, right. It's Ryan.Norberg. It's pretty simple, and that I try and post at least once a week. I've been kind of inactive, but that's more because I don't have really much to post because I'm trying to figure it all out.
Wait, hold on, folks. There's going to be lots of stuff coming in the next couple of weeks.
And then
get ready.
Twitter is Ryan Norberg 48. It's just my name plus 48. And then my YouTube, go follow me on YouTube at Ryan Norberg. And yeah, subscribe to that. And I'm hoping, obviously, my sponsors kind of get the priority in that. And now that I don't really have one, I want to make sure that the person that's getting the priority deserves it. And, when I make a video, I want it to be, brought to you by them. So, that's kind of something I like to do because, they're helping me. I want to help out. So, once I get that,
folks, he's the number one driver in the country. Mm-hmm. So follow him on that YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel. He's talking about doing more videos. So I'll have a look at it myself as well. Ryan, we're done, my friend. Thank you so much for sitting in the hot seat. It's about an hour-long show. Pretty cool. And we appreciate you kind of giving us a bit of look into what's been going on with you for the last couple of years.
Thanks, Rob. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to come and talk and explain myself. And yeah, it's been fun. I always love doing this. I always love talking to you about what's going on in racing. It's one of my favorite subjects. So I could go on for another 2 hours. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this.
Well, you know what? We'll have a roundtable sometime in the off season to talk about racecraft, bring some people on. But yeah, you know what? Great to have you here. And I think me and everybody else very excited about what we're going to see in terms of where you land for the 2019 season.
Thank you. Yeah. It should be exciting.
There he is, folks. Ryan Norberg in the hot seat here on the EKN Radio Network. This one is done and dusted. Obviously, make sure you got the app going. EKN Radio Network. Download it from iTunes or Google Play. We're done. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Rob Howden. Bye for now.